Many men over 60 quietly notice something changing, but rarely talk about it. One morning you wake up and realize something that used to happen naturally just doesn't happen anymore. Your body still feels desire, but the response is weaker, slower, or sometimes missing completely. And the question that starts to linger in the back of your mind is simple. Is this just aging, or is something else going on? Here's what most men don't realize. In many cases, the issue isn't testosterone at all. It's blood flow. And when circulation begins to decline, the body simply can't respond the way it used to. Hello, I'm Dr. James, and for more than 3 decades I've worked with older men dealing with changes in energy, circulation, and sexual health. One thing I've seen again and again is that many men focus on the wrong problem. They chase hormones, supplements, or quick fixes, while the real issue is happening inside their blood vessels. The encouraging news is that circulation is something we can support. In fact, there is one simple food that research repeatedly shows can help improve blood flow and support erectile function in older men. To understand why this works, we first need to look at the real reason erections become weaker after 60. 1. Erectile problems. After 60 are usually a circulation issue. Now that we've talked about why erections change with age, let's start with the most important truth many men over 60 are never told. In most cases, erectile problems are not mainly about testosterone. They are about blood flow. If you're in your 60s or 70s, you may have already noticed the changes. Maybe morning erections stopped appearing the way they used to. Maybe intimacy with your partner feels more uncertain. The desire may still be there, but your body doesn't respond the same way it did 20 or 30 years ago. For many men, that moment brings a quiet fear. You might start wondering if something inside your body is shutting down, or if this is the beginning of a much bigger health problem. What's important to understand is that the penis is not just a sexual organ. From a medical perspective, it's actually a vascular organ. That means it depends almost entirely on healthy blood vessels. When those vessels open properly and allow blood to flow freely, an erection happens naturally. But when circulation becomes restricted, even a healthy man with normal hormones may struggle to maintain firmness. This is especially common after age 60 because the cardiovascular system slowly changes over time. Blood vessels become less flexible, the inner lining of the arteries becomes less responsive, and circulation is no longer as efficient as it once was. These changes don't happen overnight. They develop gradually, which is why many men notice erections becoming weaker over several years rather than all at once. And here is something many doctors pay attention to very closely. The arteries that supply blood to the penis are smaller than most other arteries in the body. Because they are so small, they are often the first place where circulation problems begin to appear. In other words, erectile changes can sometimes be an early signal that the vascular system needs support. That's why the conversation we're having today is so important. If the real issue is circulation, then the next step is understanding what controls blood flow in the first place. And that brings us to a tiny but powerful molecule inside your body that plays a central role in every healthy erection. 2. Nitric oxide is the key signal that allows an erection to happen. So if circulation is the real issue, the next question is this: what actually tells blood vessels to open in the first place? Inside your body, there's a tiny signaling molecule called nitric oxide. Most people have never heard of it, but from a medical perspective, it's one of the most important chemicals involved in healthy erections. When a man becomes aroused, the nerves in the pelvic region send signals that trigger the release of nitric oxide inside the blood vessels of the penis. This molecule acts like a messenger. It tells the smooth muscles in the vessel walls to relax. Once those muscles relax, the arteries widen and blood can rush into the erectile chambers. That increase in blood flow is what creates firmness. For men in their 20s or 30s, this process usually happens automatically. The signal is strong, the blood vessels respond quickly, and the erection develops naturally. But many men over 60 begin to notice that the response isn't as reliable anymore. You may feel the mental desire, you may feel physically stimulated, yet the body doesn't fully cooperate. That disconnect can be deeply frustrating, and for some men it creates quiet anxiety about intimacy or confidence with a partner. What's often happening in those moments is not a loss of masculinity or attraction. It's simply that the nitric oxide signal is weaker than it used to be. Without enough nitric oxide, the blood vessels cannot relax completely, and blood flow into the penis becomes limited. Understanding this is incredibly important because it shifts the focus away from shame or self-blame. The real issue is biological. It's happening at the level of the blood vessels themselves. And once you understand that nitric oxide is the signal that controls blood flow, the next step becomes much clearer. The question is no longer just why erections weaken with age. The real question becomes how the body produces nitric oxide, and what happens to that process as men move into their 60s and 70s. 3. Aging naturally reduces nitric oxide production. Now, once we understand how important nitric oxide is, the next thing many men ask is a very simple question. Why does this signal start fading with age? And the answer is something that happens quietly inside the body as we move into our 60s and 70s. Over time, the cells that line your blood vessels, called endothelial cells, slow down. When you were younger, these cells produced nitric oxide easily and in large amounts. That's why blood vessels could open quickly and respond almost instantly when the brain sent the signal for arousal. But after about age 55 or 60, that system becomes less efficient. For many men watching this, you may recognize the change without realizing what's behind it. You still feel desire, you still feel emotionally connected to your partner, but the body doesn't respond the same way. Sometimes the erection starts but fades quickly. Other times, it never becomes fully firm. And that can create a quiet worry many older men carry but rarely talk about. Some begin to question their masculinity. Others start avoiding intimacy altogether because they're afraid of embarrassment or disappointment. But medically speaking, this change is not about weakness or failure, it's about biology. As nitric oxide production declines, blood vessels simply don't open as widely as they once did. On top of that, inflammation and oxidative stress slowly increase with age, which makes arteries less flexible. The signal becomes weaker, and the blood vessels become less responsive to that signal. And here's something many cardiologists pay close attention to. The arteries that supply blood to the penis are extremely small, much smaller than the arteries that supply the heart. Because they are so small, they often show circulation problems years before other symptoms appear. This is why understanding this process matters so much. Once nitric oxide begins to decline, the key question becomes how to support that pathway again. And that's where something surprisingly simple, something found in everyday foods, can start to play a powerful role. 4. The one food that can support this process: beetroot. So if nitric oxide declines with age, the natural question becomes this: can we help the body produce more of it again? This is where something surprisingly simple comes in. Something that doesn't require prescriptions, complicated treatments, or expensive supplements. It comes from food, and one of the most powerful sources is beetroot. Now I know some of you might be thinking, a vegetable? That can't possibly make a difference. But from a physiological standpoint, beetroot is actually one of the richest natural sources of dietary nitrates. These nitrates are not the same as the processed chemicals people worry about in cured meats. In vegetables like beetroot, nitrates are part of a natural system that the body can convert into nitric oxide. Here's why that matters for men over 60. Earlier, we talked about how the body's normal nitric oxide production slows down with age. But dietary nitrates give the body another pathway. When you eat nitrate-rich foods like beetroot, those compounds are first converted by bacteria in your mouth, and then later in the digestive system into nitric oxide. That nitric oxide then helps blood vessels relax and widen, improving circulation throughout the body. For many older men, this idea can be surprisingly reassuring, because the fear many carry is that the body has simply stopped working. But the reality is often different. The system is still there. It just needs support. When circulation improves, the body can respond more naturally again. This is not about instant miracles or dramatic overnight changes, but supporting nitric oxide through food can help restore a pathway your body already understands. And for men who want a safer, more natural way to support circulation, that's a powerful starting point. But the next thing many men want to know is whether this actually works in real life. And that brings us to what research has shown about how quickly beetroot can begin improving blood flow in the body. 5. Beetroot can improve blood flow faster than most people expect. Now, the next question most men ask is very practical. Does this actually make a real difference, and how quickly could it help? Because when you're in your 60s or 70s, you've probably seen plenty of ads promising miracle results. Many older men have already tried pills, supplements, or online products that claim to fix erectile problems overnight. After a while, it's easy to become skeptical. But what makes beetroot different is that its effect is not based on hype, it's based on circulation. Studies in cardiovascular research have shown that nitrate-rich foods like beetroot can begin improving blood vessel function within just a few hours after consumption. That's because once dietary nitrates enter the body, they start converting into nitric oxide fairly quickly, helping blood vessels relax and allowing blood to flow more easily. For men over 60, this matters more than many people realize. At this stage of life, the biggest barrier to strong erections is often sluggish circulation. The heart may still be working, the nerves may still be signaling desire, but the blood simply doesn't move as efficiently as it once did. When that circulation improves, even slightly, the difference can sometimes be noticeable. Some men report that after regularly including nitrate-rich foods in their diet, they begin noticing subtle changes. Morning erections may return after weeks of absence. Firmness during intimacy may feel more reliable. Even overall energy can improve because better blood flow benefits the brain, muscles, and heart as well. Now it's important to be realistic. This isn't a pharmaceutical effect that forces an erection immediately. What it does is support the body's natural vascular response. For older men who have quietly worried that their body has lost the ability, that realization can be incredibly reassuring. And once men understand that circulation can improve, the next step becomes even more important, learning how to use beetroot properly so the body can actually benefit from those nitrates. 6. How seniors should use beetroot to support circulation. Now, once men hear that beetroot can support blood flow, the next question is usually very simple. How should you actually use it? Because many older adults have learned the hard way that more is not always better, especially when it comes to health. If you're in your 60s or 70s, your body processes nutrients differently than it did decades ago. The goal is not to overwhelm the system, but to support it gently and consistently. Research suggests that a relatively small amount of beetroot can already provide meaningful levels of dietary nitrates. For most seniors, about half a cup of cooked beetroot or a small glass of diluted beetroot juice is enough to begin supporting nitric oxide production. Timing also matters more than people realize. Many vascular specialists recommend consuming nitrate-rich foods earlier in the day, often in the morning. This gives the body several hours to convert nitrates into nitric oxide and improve circulation throughout the day. Some men notice that when circulation is stronger during the daytime, energy levels improve and the body feels more responsive overall. Another thing that's important to understand is consistency. Many people try something once or twice and expect dramatic results immediately. But vascular health works differently. The body responds better when supportive habits are repeated regularly over time. When nitrate-rich foods like beetroot become part of a routine, rather than an occasional experiment, the circulatory system begins adapting in a healthier direction. For older men who have been quietly worried about declining performance, this approach can feel far more comfortable than relying on medications alone. It allows the body to rebuild support gradually instead of forcing a temporary response. But there is one more piece that many people overlook. Even the best food in the world cannot fully help circulation if certain daily habits are still damaging blood vessels. And understanding those habits is just as important as understanding the food itself. 7. The habits that can either protect or damage your blood flow. Now, this brings us to something that many men don't like to hear, but it's an important part of the conversation. Even the most helpful food in the world cannot fully improve circulation if certain daily habits are still damaging the blood vessels. And for men over 60, those habits often develop slowly over decades without being noticed. Many older adults watching this may already have conditions like high blood pressure, prediabetes, or cholesterol issues. These are extremely common in the United States, especially after retirement age. The challenge is that these conditions quietly affect the same blood vessels that control erections. When arteries become stiff, inflamed, or narrowed, the body simply struggles to move blood where it needs to go. This is why some men become discouraged. They try one supplement or medication, and when the result isn't perfect, they assume nothing will help. But the reality is that circulation is shaped by a combination of small daily behaviors. Smoking, for example, is one of the fastest ways to damage nitric oxide production and narrow blood vessels. Excess alcohol can interfere with vascular control and hormone balance. Even something as simple as large late-night meals high in sugar can affect metabolic health and blood flow the following day. The encouraging news is that the opposite is also true. Small positive habits can strengthen the circulatory system in powerful ways. Light physical activity like a daily walk, proper hydration, and balanced meals rich in vegetables can gradually restore flexibility to the blood vessels. For many men in their 60s and 70s, this realization can be deeply reassuring. The body may not respond the way it did at 30, but it is far from powerless. When circulation is supported through both nutrition and lifestyle, the vascular system often becomes more responsive again. And this leads us to the most important message of all: understanding what aging really means for men who want to stay healthy, confident, and active in the years ahead. 8. Final thoughts. Supporting your body as you age. As we get older, the body becomes more sensitive to small changes. Systems that once worked automatically, circulation, hormones, sleep, and recovery, no longer have the same margin for error. What many men experience in their 60s or 70s is not the end of their vitality, but a signal that the body now requires more attention and care than it did decades ago. Erectile changes are often one of the first visible signs that circulation needs support. They are not simply about intimacy. In many cases, they reflect what is happening throughout the entire vascular system, including the heart and brain. Ignoring these signals can allow small problems to grow quietly over time. The encouraging news is that the body still has an incredible ability to adapt. Simple choices, supporting nitric oxide through foods like beetroot, improving circulation through daily movement, and protecting blood vessels through healthy habits, can make a meaningful difference. What you do today can influence how your body feels in the next 1, 3, or even 5 years. Men who begin supporting their circulation now often maintain stronger energy, better cardiovascular health, and greater confidence as they continue aging. Growing older does not mean losing control of your health. It means learning to understand your body better and taking thoughtful steps to protect it for the years ahead.